Welcome back, everyone, to our monthly panel discussion. This is our Halloween special panel, and we have our wonderful panel speakers today. We've got Karen Holton, host of the Quantum Guide Show and Aliens and Angels, and Stephen from BG Cast, and my lovely wife, Jennifer. And let's go around and give quick introductions. I'm Chris Mathieu. I'm host of Forbidden Knowledge News and founder of Forbidden Knowledge Network. Karen.
I'm Karen Holton, and I have two podcasts. I have the Quantum Guide Show, which is live every Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Mountain. That's 3 p.m. Eastern. And on Sundays, I host Aliens and Angels, which is also live. And it's an hour earlier. It's at noon Mountain or 2 p.m. Eastern time. And what else? Just having fun and creating content and hanging out with my homies.
All right, Stephen.
What's going on, everybody? It is me, Steve of BG Cast under this mask. I am, of course, you guys can find me on the Forbidden Knowledge Network website, and you guys can also find me on every major podcast platform, Rumble and YouTube, and all major social medias and the Mars Red Light District.
Yes, man, the Mars Red Light District is definitely where it's at. Tonight, we are going to be telling some scary stories, maybe some of our own. For me, it's going to be mostly from some of my guests. I haven't had many scary experiences, and the one I have, I've told many times about a reptilian shape-shifting ex-girlfriend chasing me around on mushrooms. So we'll skip that one for tonight, but I've got plenty more in the pipeline, and we're going to go around and we're going to have a good time. And I forgot to let Jennifer introduce herself. Jennifer, introduce yourself.
Thanks, honey. Hi, I'm Jennifer Halcame. I am a life coach and a Reiki teacher and a psychic intuitive. You can find me at Jennifer Halcame at gmail.com. Thanks, Chris.
All right. So, who wants to tell the first scary story tonight? Any takers? Any takers? If
All
not,
right, I've got a personal one.
all right, let's go.
I've got a personal one. I'm gonna go ahead and just pop this up for a second so I can breathe a little. So one of the scariest things that's happened to me recently, Chris and Jen know about it. I'm not sure Karen knows about it, but it's when I decided to, on November of 2023, take one of my last heroic mushroom doses that I have taken for quite some time. And I ended up getting jumped by interdimensional hyperfractal reptilian beings. That was not a fun time. It was not. And I guess it all begins the day after Thanksgiving. I've been really working towards achieving the natural psychedelic state. And I've achieved it, but this was kind of before then. We're going about a year ago at this point. And, I wanted to take my last heroic dose for a while. I decided that, we're going to give it one last hoorah. And, we're going to go in and we're going to take care of some of the deep-seated stuff. And then we're going to work with the other things through the natural means. So I went ahead and I weighed out about 5 grams worth of, that Thai strain of mushroom, and I ended up taking them. And as I'm sitting at my kitchen table, things start to get weird. I start to have this weird feeling start to overcome me. And at first I was like, okay, this is interesting. So, a lot of you guys know, even though I'm not a huge drinker, I home make wine. I make my own wine. So I decided I would go ahead and pour myself a glass of this wine and kind of sip it slowly, and kind of just pace myself for what was about to happen. And here's where things took a turn for the scary. And if you, I guess the best way I can preface this story is if somebody went into this without having knowledge of self, it would have probably been a very scary situation. And it almost was a scary situation for me. So as I sit down at the table, I'm going to have a sip of this wine. And I kid you not, everybody, I felt something as I was lifting the glass to my face tap into my arm, and the glass slammed into my face and got wine everywhere. So I was like, what's going on here? And then I look up, and then they started to form these hyperdimensional fractaline reptilian beings. There was about 6 of them. And I was like, great, this is how we're starting off today. This is awesome. Okay. And so I remember I get up and like I'm looking at them and they're looking at me and they're just going ha 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 and like freaking sitting there like poking me, like laughing at me, like teasing me. And I'm like, holy crap, dude. So I literally at this point, I'm like, I need to go and get to a quiet place and a safe place at this point because this is fucking crazy. And so at the time I was saying this daily protection mantra. And as I was saying this daily protection mantra, I went upstairs, I turned on my shower because hot showers relax you. Like everybody who takes a hot shower, I mean, gets relaxed. That's just what happens. So I go to turn the shower on. I'm saying this protection mantra. Then all 6 of them take their hands and start grabbing me around the throat. Oh, yes. And then I could not even speak at that point. So yes, this is becoming a very scary mushroom trip at this point. I just had interdimensional beings choking me and like grabbing a hold of my throat chakra so I couldn't speak. So I said, screw the shower. I'm out of here. And like I walked downstairs and then I just sat there for a minute. I'm like, no, I'm going to go try this. So I went upstairs into my room and I started doing internal alchemy. So I was laying in my bed, I immersed myself in what was going on, and then I like looked down at my subtle body and I saw them feeding off of me. And this was not fun. So I immediately, Jen will appreciate this, sent Reiki to that area of my body and I got them off of me. But the craziest thing about it was as I was pulling them or pushing them off of me, I could see a streak of my life force energy that they were eating that kind of left with them. And so I threw them into the corner of my room. I shut the door and I said, I'm going to deal with them later. I need to decompress after what just happened right now. So, like, I ended up going and sitting down and, kind of collecting myself for the rest of the experience. But the reason why this was so scary is it was so out of left field. And while, yes, I cannot prove that something hit my arm and slammed the wine glass into my face, my wife saw it. So we do have a witness account of what happened there. But nonetheless, it was a lesson learned. And hopefully, I don't have to deal with that ever again.
Right on. Now, Jen, you were telling me some scary stories before. You want to share one of those?
Oh my. Yeah, so I was trying to decide which one to tell tonight. Um, when I was in my early 20s, I had a lot of very scary experiences. Um, I think the one I'm going to share tonight is the first time I ever attended someone's past life regression.
Ooh.
It was I had just moved to Charlotte out of my parents' house. I was 19, I guess, about then. And I was just getting into my studies, like truly getting into my studies. And I one of my roommates at the time in Charlotte said, "Hey, well, let's do a past life regression tonight. We've got some shrooms and I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. Never done that before. So let's go find out what that's about." And it took about 3 hours in this regression. And he kept wanting to go deeper and go further back and further back. And by the end of it, he opened his eyes, and his eyes were just black orbs. There were no eyeballs in his sockets. It was the freakiest thing I've ever seen. He said that he had regressed back to what he was before he was human. And on top of that, that wasn't even the scariest part. The scariest part was it ended up breaking his psyche, and he became schizophrenic and still is to this day. Um, yeah, it freaked him out that bad. So that was a pretty scary aha moment for me.
Oh, that's crazy. Karen, any stories?
Yeah, so we're telling true stories, what really happened to us. We're not making them up,
Or
right?
someone else, or, a guest you've had.
I I've been thinking for 2 weeks on what to tell. And the scariest shit that's ever happened to me is not metaphysical. I'd like to tell you what happened to me on Halloween in 2006. And this happened in a hospital. So, and this is really gross, but I think I should tell it anyway, even though it's not exactly a Halloween story. So, I went in for a very minor abdominal hernia repair. It should have taken an hour and a half. And I woke up after the surgery on Halloween, and I was in a lot of pain, and they just told me that was normal, and I'd be going home in a couple of days, and gave me some medicine, and told me to, eat and drink and move around, and I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. So the next day, I'm just following their orders. I'm drinking, fluids and eating my jello and all this other stuff and moving around. And my body just starts to swell up and get bigger. And every day it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was on a weight loss program before I went in there. So I knew what I weighed before I went in there. And about 5 days later, I was so big. And they decided they'd keep me in longer, but no doctor would examine me. Nobody in the hospital would examine me. I'm in a hospital, and this is going to tell you what it's like. The real truth about the medical system in Canada, guys. It's not what you think. Everyone thinks, oh, it's great. You get free Medicare. Yeah, well, this is the kind of treatment you get. So, anyways, I'm just getting bigger and bigger. I'm in so much pain. By about 5 days later, I'm so big I can hardly walk, and my mind starts to snap. And none of the nurses would get the doctor in to see me. Nobody seemed to care. They just kept me in a little longer. And I weighed myself, and I had gained 80 pounds in 5 days, and they still wouldn't examine me. The doctor came by, and I asked him to examine me, and he refused. He says, no, you just got to keep, get up, move around more, get up, move around more. Long story short, by the seventh day, I was nearly dead. They rushed me in, 5 hour surgery. Turns out he had cut me up inside, and he'd put a bunch of holes and lacerations in my intestines, and all that body fluid had leaked out into all my organs and everything. And so they couldn't find all the holes and all the tears and stuff. And so they by the time I came out of anesthetic, um, there was this nurse sitting beside me, and I was kind of out of it, not gonna lie. And she said, "Oh, the part about a PICC line is you don't have to worry about anything." And she's like this artificial, really creepy, really cringe voice telling me about what she's going to do to me. I says, "No, you're not doing that to me." She looked at me and she says, Karen, if we don't do this, you're going to die. And that was it. So they ran a tube in my arm, through my veins, into my heart, and they gave me an experimental drug that caused my intestines, my veins, the casing around my brain, everything to become rigid like a garden hose. So that was the only way they could get medicine and nutrient into my body. So they did that to me, and I didn't want it, but they did that to me anyway. And then, like, couldn't function mentally. So 3 days later, they realized I was suffering from extreme oxygen deprivation, and they did a CAT scan on me and they found out my lungs had filled up with this fluid. So my lungs weren't full of fluid, the lung cavities were, so my lungs couldn't inflate. And I was dying of oxygen deprivation in the hospital. So they shoved some tubes in me to try to drain me. They cut me open down the front and I had to heal open wound. This is really scary, guys. I had to heal open wound. I was hooked up to suction machines. And then they gave me the wrong nutrient mix and turned me into a diabetic. I had brain damage from lack of oxygen. I couldn't communicate. I had what they call delirium from too much anesthetic. And then this is the icing on the cake and the scariest part of all. So then it's about 5 days after the second surgery. I'm lying in my bed. I'm not thinking I'm going to live. I'm really worried I'm going to die. I'm worried about my kids. And the doctor came in, the surgeon, and he took off my bandage and he stood over me and he inhaled the wafting fumes from inside of my body, and I saw his eyes roll back in his head. He was getting off on the smell of my insides. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Sorry, this is really scary, and this is a true story. And it has taken me from 2006 right up until just a couple years ago to even be able to communicate, to be able to think again. And of course, doing podcasts has really, really helped and been really, really therapeutic. But it's been a long haul for recovery. But that's a pretty scary story. I hope I haven't freaked anybody out, but literally in Canada, when you go into the hospital, you're taking your life into your own hands.
Now, was this doctor still practicing as far as you know?
Yeah,
Stay away from that dude.
yeah,
Definitely. I'm glad you made it out of there.
yeah, me
Wow.
too.
Same.
Me too.
Same. That's
I'm a
crazy.
tough old cookie, that's for sure.
Definitely. Wow. All right. So I'm going to tell my one and only personal kind of scary experience. It was around, gosh, when was it? 2018 or 2019. No, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm too far in the future. It was 2012. 2012 or 2013. And I'm going through a end of a bad marriage at the time, very depressed, just started a corporate job that I hated. And, this talk show, any of this was nowhere on my radar. And every time that I would go to sleep, I would get sleep paralysis. And it'd be a very different and strange experience each time. It started out with me just not being able to move and maybe hearing some noises above me, a couple of weird bangs, and then I would be able to pull myself up. But eventually I started seeing people walking on the side of the bed, just shadows, and it was not just like one or two. I can even look out of the side of my eye and into the next room, and then there was like shadow people walking all around in my living room. It sounded like they were having a party and up and down my hallway. And that kept continuing until it came to a head when I'd start seeing the shadow people, and then this loud banging noise would start on my ceiling, and it get louder and louder, and I just had this feeling of dread, like something's gonna come through my ceiling and kill me or something. And eventually, like when I couldn't take it anymore, I was able to pull myself out of it. But that eventually just stopped after I was able to get myself into a little better state of mind. But that's the only type of, really scary experience as far as I can remember. And, some would speculate it's not even paranormal, that it's just part of the sleep paralysis scientific whatever is occurring, symptom that it's occurring. But I happen to think that there's a lot more to it whenever we're having those experiences. Who's next? Steven, got any more?
Well, let me dig through my mind here. You know what's really funny is a lot of the scary things that have happened to me personally. Always have this weird, very strange silver lining at the end of them. So it's like, at first you're scared during the experience, and then it's like, oh, I shouldn't have been afraid. Look at that. And I guess one of the ones I can use is actually from a guest of mine. That is actually it's scary in its own right. It has to do with the medical system, and it's kind of playing off what Karen was saying. It's kind of the same here now in the United States. If you go into a hospital, and you just happen to be somebody who's, I guess the best way to put it, who's aware. We'll put it that way. I can't prove this, but it's almost as if they know. And it's weird. It's always been a weird experience. But my friend the Lion, who I had on the show, this was actually back during COVID times. And this is what kind of led to his awakening, which, I mean, that's kind of the silver lining for him there, that this led to him being aware and where he is today. Although the experience was kind of very interesting. So this was during COVID times. He ended up getting very sick, like so sick that he ended up going to the hospital. Now, this is, from what he told me, was during peak COVID times. So everybody was still in a state of mesmerized terror. The respirators were going hard. They had dots on the floor, the whole 9 yards. So he ends up going in. And the first thing the nurse says to him, and he goes in, he goes, I'm very sick. And she goes, did you get your COVID vaccine? And he goes, no. And she goes, looks at him dead in the face and goes, well, you deserve anything that happens to you at this point. And you just to hear a healthcare professional say that to you, I can imagine you're just like, holy shit, what is going on? And so then he dealt with gang stalking, kind of the medical version of gang stalking. So they kept moving him to different rooms, right? And they just would leave him there for like hours, things like that. And anytime he would call to ask for help, he was blatantly ignored. And, the people were just being completely and totally nasty to him. All of the hospital staff, all of the doctors. Now, here's the kicker. So he said I think it was either 16 to 18 hours of this. Can you imagine being really sick and just people giving you the runaround for 16 to 18 hours when you're in a hospital? That's kind of weird in and of itself. So then the hospital, this is the weird thing. The hospital, it was either the CFO or the CEO, got on a video call with him. I know this sounds weird, right? And tried to persuade him to take the stabby. Have any of you ever heard of a CEO or a CFO video calling you while you're in your hospital bed to try and convince you to take the stabby? And he told me it was right then and there I realized that something really fucked up is going on, that I have a hospital CEO while I'm deathly ill, Zoom calling me on the nurse's cell phone to convince me to take the stabby. So he didn't, of course. And then eventually what they ended up giving him was, I think it was ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and ended up sending him home. The reason why I find that story scary and just all out weird for the first thing is number one, when have you ever, like I said, when have you ever, when is the CEO going to be like, hey, Steve, I really need you to consider, who are you? Do I know you? Why is the CFO or the CEO of a hospital freaking video calling me on my deathbed and trying to convince me to take this? And also, too, man, just the horrors of the American healthcare system. If he, and like I stated in the beginning, I can't prove it. I don't have any means of proving it. But at least in my experience, from what I've experienced going to hospitals and what other people who are aware have experienced going to hospitals, they know. It just seems like they know. And that's the best way I can put it.
Right on, right on. That's terrifying, actually.
That's pretty terrifying.
Karen, any other scary stories?
Yeah, I got a few. So I wanted to just also finish my last story. Sorry, I cut it off because I thought I was getting
Yeah,
too
no worries.
gruesome. I was 6 weeks in the hospital with nothing by mouth. I was skin and bones, and there was no help for me when I got home. It was really, really horrible. But anyway, moving on from there. I'm going to tell you about something that happened that was really, this is a short story. I have a couple little short stories that happened when the last time I did what I call a vision quest or I did LSD. And this was about probably 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm in my townhouse, right? And I get myself all dosed up, and my son, he gets dosed along with me. And after I kind of got used to the effect, we redosed ourselves because it's better to have less than too much. I actually haven't done it since then, but anyway. So I'm getting pretty high and having lots of visual effects and everything. My son, I don't know how he did it, but he fell asleep. And all of a sudden I hear bang, bang, bang at the door, bang on the door. It's the police. And I thought, oh my God, it's someone playing a prank on me. It's got to be a prank because I mean, I'm having trouble differentiating reality from non reality at this point, right? Bang, bang, bang on the door. Excuse me. Open up. It's the police. Open up or we're going to break the door down. I went, oh, I've had enough of this. So I go to the door and I open it, and there's a dozen police cars with all their lights going. There's half a dozen of the canine dogs that they use, all trying to rearing up, trying to get at me. I opened the door and I was just like, what the, pardon my language. And they said, where's so and so? And I said, I have no idea. They said, doesn't so and so live here? And I said, no. They said, well, then why didn't you answer the door? I says, because I thought it was a prank. Honestly, I thought it was a prank. I had no idea that it was really you. And the guy says, oh, sorry to have bothered you, ma'am. Have a nice evening. And they turned around and they all left. And I walked back into the house and I went, what are the chances of that happening? After I decided I'm going to go on a vision quest. So I decided I was going to move out of the neighborhood, which I did. But that was pretty interesting. That's my one psychedelic freaky story.
Right on.
Oh man.
Jennifer.
Oh, well, I've got kind of an interesting one. So I decided that I would tell the story of some boys that grew up down the street from me. Um, I call them my brothers because I've literally known them every day of my life. We grew up in a very strange neighborhood, uh, white suburbia, middle of Georgia. And what we didn't know was the land that our neighborhood was built on was owned by a ruthless slave owner back in the day. And he had killed many, many slaves, many, many Union soldiers when they came through, even children on the property. It was crazy haunted. And the house remained behind a church that was literally right across the fence from this backyard of these boys. So there were four boys and their mom and their dad, and they bought the house at the same time my parents did in this neighborhood. Um, they did not know that there was a hellmouth in their house. So after they moved in, it took 2 nights before the oldest two boys refused to ever stay in that house again. They moved out, they were older. The two youngest ones and their parents stayed in the house. It was about 6 months before the father got possessed, went in the garage, crawled in his van, and shot himself in the head. Uh, After that, the mother and the two youngest boys stayed in the house, grew up in the house. We all grew up in the house. My parents sort of stepped in where their dad needed to be, and they became like brothers to me. The two youngest boys went on to become quite successful musicians and tried throughout the years to leave the house, only to find themselves within a year or so back in the house, tortured by all of these entities that kept coming through this portal. Um, it was insane. Eventually, the youngest one developed, they both ended up developing schizophrenia. The youngest one developed paranoid schizophrenia, ended up taking a gun, shooting his brother, uh, making him a quadriplegic, and then shooting himself in the head. Shortly after that, the mother ended up having a massive stroke and died in the house. And then there was one left. Len was his name. And he then was in a wheelchair and all of this kind of stuff. And we talked him into selling the house. We're like, dude, you got to get out of here. Like, this is going to kill you. And eventually he did sell the house. Felt very, very bad, even though we tried to clear the house 4 times and we still couldn't get this thing closed. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. Um, and within a year, Len also took his own life. This hellmouth took an entire family. And it was honestly the scariest thing I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of stuff over the years, but that's my story.
All right. All right. I've got a three in one. I'm just going to tell the most recent stories that Ryan Burns told me whenever we went out to Skinwalker Ranch, and I got chills up my spine for these stories. Anything that happens out there is crazy. A lot of the things that Ryan's talked about before. The first one is he met a gentleman who is a very black magic practitioner, and for a while he let him, I don't know why, stay at his little Space Wolf research station, and ended up doing all kind of black magic rituals, sex magic, had different women over there, crazy stuff, put pinnacles and all kinds of symbols all over the outside of the his station there. Eventually, he was able to get him out, but he just moved right next door. He's renting the plot from him, but that's a different story. Um, but anyway, he moved out right next door. Whenever we went there, we saw he has a little tent set up with this like very technological light type of thing that shoots up, and he says it's supposed to attract the old ones at night. But anyway, when Ryan gets back to his trailer after he ends up getting this guy out of there, they had all these symbols painted all over his trailer, and it looked didn't it say it looked like it was in blood or something like that, or in ash, some weird ash. And it wouldn't come out no matter what they did, no matter what they would do to try and clean this stuff up. They tried everything, every cleaning chemical known to man, and it wouldn't come out, and they were baffled by it. Well, they went to one of their shaman native friends, and he said, "Well, you just got to use holy water." And he was like, "No way." So they did. They did. They went back. They had the water blessed, and all he did was throw the water on these sigils, and they just like dissolved away when the holy water hit it right away. That's one of the things. Then he told us about on his security camera, he noticed this cloaked entity moving across a field and kind of glitching in and out of existence. And he had crosses set up along the perimeter for, I guess, spiritual protection. And this entity would get close to the cross and it would like start glitching out and moving backwards. It wouldn't be able to go any further than these rows of crosses. That was pretty creepy. The creepiest thing he told me was about a call he got from his security guy that these people were on his property and they were messing around near one of his trailers. So his security guy wanted permission to, get his guns and go out there and take care of business. So he's like, "Yeah, do what you got to do." So his security guy and one other guy grabbed their guns and they went out there and they see these guys rummaging through stuff. And when they yell at them to freeze, they all sit down like dogs and perch like dogs at the same time and are just staring at them. And they've got guns pointed at them and like within seconds, they all jump up at the same time and start lunging towards them like dogs. Well, they unload on them and they hit them multiple times. All they do is turn around and run faster than they've ever seen humans run before and just scale over fences just like dogs running. And they took off until they couldn't see him anymore. The next day, the local police department reports finding 4 dead bodies with gunshot wounds, each in separate locations behind locked doors. And they were all natives from the Ute tribes. So that was pretty crazy, man.
That's really crazy.
Yeah.
That's out of this world. I couldn't even imagine if you were to shoot somebody that many times and they were just unfazed and just scaled a
All of
fence.
them.
Yeah.
And they all seem to be like synchronized, but like superhuman speed too.
I'm wondering if it was, could it have been essentially like they were operating off of a hive mind of some kind? That's
He
a
told
very
plenty of
interesting.
stories about the skinwalkers, and he believes that these were them. They have many different kinds. What's that? Oh, the naked lady.
Coyote head.
Oh, yeah, and in the trailer we were staying at, the night after we left, he found one of the pelts that's used by the skinwalkers inside the trailer next to where we were sleeping, which is pretty creepy. But he tells all this kinds of stories about these natives that he saw a naked lady walking across the road with a pouch full of these pelts that they supposedly use to transform into these otherworldly animals. Crazy shit, man.
Hi guys, break time for a short message. Are you looking for the perfect, unique seasonal gift? Check out Zendome's Orgonite. They are my unique brand of orgone generators, and they are affordable, ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. They are only available through my website, KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. These beautiful devices are simple compounds which balance ambient energy by converting negative energy and EMF into positive healing energy with many easily confirmed health benefits. They help diminish the harmful effects of negative energies and EMF by attracting and converting them, retuning them into new and more healthful sound and light wave patterns. They also produce orgone energy, which is also known as chi, prana, zero point, and life force. And you can use these devices for focusing the mind, healing, meditation, and for spiritual growth. Zendome's Orgonite are my unique brand of orgone generators, and they are only available through my website. Don't be fooled by imitations. Check out my website to see my latest selection at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. That's KarenHolton Healthcoach.com. Check them out today. Now, let's get back to the show.
Dude, I can't even. I know a little bit about Skinwalker lore and things like that, but it just really sounds like I'm curious to see the ley lines this place is on too, because even where I'm sitting at here down in the west end of Lakewood, I'm in the middle of this pyramid of ley lines, and there's kooky things that go on here, but no, that's bizarre. I get that is just, you can't explain that away. You shoot somebody, especially depending on what kind of guns they had, and they're all acting in unison, and then they take off even quicker. Yeah, I probably would have had a coming to the divine at that point myself.
Yeah. A little poo-poo pants. All right. Steven, you got any more?
Well, I'm digging through my memory, and my memory isn't what it used to be. But there is a story of mine, now that I think back, of when my friend thought his house was haunted. So, us being the interesting 13-year-old kids that we decided to do a clearing with a Ouija board. That is the last time I will ever touch one of those. And with a Bible. So, there was some really, I know 13-year-old logic, right? Ouija board, Bible. We got this. We're going to get this. We're good. So, I had a couple of experiences in that home too. One of the weirdest ones was I was there waiting for him to get home. I forgot what it was. And he's like, yeah, let yourself in, go have a snack. And, I was sitting in his kitchen making a snack, and then I heard him calling my name from his mom's room. And his name's Will. We all call him Hez for short. That's another story in and of itself, how we got that nickname. But so I'm like, Will, is that you? And then I go and I bust in his mom's room, and there's nobody there. So I was like, oh, maybe he's not lying. Maybe there is something going on in this house. So we were like, it was me, my brother, Will, and a couple of other friends of ours, and we managed to find this old raggedy ass Ouija board. That I forgot where we dug it out of at that point. This was so long ago, and then we grabbed a Bible. And we went into his house, and we were all staying the night there. His mom was sleeping. It was 3 a.m. We all get up and we're like, let's do this. So, we light the candles around the Ouija board. We're doing the whole 9 yards, and so we start touching the planchette. And at first, we had so many hands on the planchette. We're like, no, you're moving it. No, you're moving it. No, you're moving it, vice versa. So then we started asking it questions like, is anybody here? And then I remember one of the weirdest things that happened is we got a hard shove to yes. And I was like, okay. I was like, I don't think that was any of you, was it? And they were all super quiet. And I was like, okay. So I was like, what do you want here? Like, what is your business? 13-year-old questions. I'm trying to like remember these to the best of my ability. And it went over to no. Like it didn't want to answer. And I remember I'm like sitting there like, okay. So I broke open the Bible. And I forgot exactly which verse I was reading, but I know about halfway through the verse, like 3 of his pictures fell off the wall, and all of the candles blew out. So if you can picture 5 extremely terrified 13-year-old kids running out the front door of this home, basically screaming at the top of our lungs. And his mom ended up getting up and she came out like, what the fuck are y'all doing this late? Like, what is your problem? So, Southern woman. So Jen knows, like, it's like, what the fuck y'all doing this late out here doing this? And then eventually after that, man, the activity ended up ceasing in his house, and which was weird. Maybe it just needed to burp the spirit. I don't know. Like maybe it just but after that, it kind of subsided. And then I lied because that was the second to last time I used a Ouija board. The last time was actually my very first girlfriend. She was a Wiccan. And it's kind of interesting how, she was a Wiccan and here I am later in life doing what I'm doing. Maybe she was like some kind of messenger for me at the time. I don't know, but we ended up using a Ouija board at her house one time too. And we ended up communicating with this spirit named Dot. And she was pretty pleasant, like she wasn't malevolent. But again, something with the candles and the Ouija board, we asked a specific question and all of the candles blew out at once. So there's something very profoundly interesting with those tools. I mean, do I think a Ouija board should be a kid's toy? Absolutely not. I don't know why it's in stores advertised as a game, as a children's toy. Seems kind of like a setup to me, but that's just my opinion. But at the same time, I'm not saying don't use it if you know what you're doing and you're trained and you're very knowledgeable and you have that knowledge of self, then if that's the route that you feel like you need to go, I guess go ahead and do it. But other than that, I think the scariest thing that potentially happened to me, was a night where I did have sleep paralysis. It wasn't as big as yours, Chris, but I did wake up and see a dark cloaked figure standing in my hallway, which definitely kind of freaked me out a little bit at the time. And, I ended up shaking myself out of it and nothing was there, but like, man, like I'm trying to go through my Rolodex, my head Rolodex of all the interesting, scary things that have happened to me. But unfortunately, like I'm drawing kind of a blank with some things. It's just been a long time.
That's all right. We'll circle on back if you have anything. Jen,
Um,
Karen.
Um, yes. Okay. So when I was growing up, we always had what we affectionately called a ghost living in the house, and it would do things like move chairs, open doors, close doors, but nothing really scary ever happened. And my mom would refer to it as George or whatever, and we just kind of like, oh yeah, hi George, or that's just George, or whatever. We didn't think too much of it. Then later, by the time I was in my early 20s, I wasn't living at home, but I went to visit my mom at my mom's house, and she wasn't home. And I was downstairs, and I could hear upstairs in the kitchen someone was dragging all the pots and pans out of my mom's cupboard. And I thought, well, I wonder if my mom's home. That's weird. I could hear them banging and crashing, and this was all going on. So I went upstairs and there was nothing out of place. There was no pots that were pulled out of the cupboard, nothing like that. So we had things like that happen all the time, but we never felt threatened or in danger or no cringe at all. But then I want to tell you what happened when my grandmother came to live with my mom and dad. When she got really, really old, she was more or less bedridden, and my mom hated her, and she hated my mom. But my mom took her in out of a sense of duty, and my grandma had nowhere else to go. And my dad, he wanted to take care of her in her old age, even though he was never home. So, um, my mom was always muttering that she couldn't wait till grandma died, couldn't wait to get rid of her, couldn't wait to get rid of her. Well, one day grandma died. Shortly after that, I'm visiting with my kids, and in the morning, my daughter comes out. My daughter's very intuitive. She comes out, she says, "Oh, old Grandma Tracy was in the bedroom last night." And I went, "Really?" And she says, "Yeah, she was there. And she lives there, Mom. She's there all the time now. She's never gonna leave." And I had to and then we had other people who also sensed her presence, and I stayed in the room, and I also saw things move and knew that it was my grandmother, and I wasn't afraid of her. But what was really interesting is my mom really wanted to get rid of the old lady. She died, and my mom was not free. The old lady stayed in that house. So I just thought that was really interesting and kind of poetic justice.
Right on.
I have, speaking of, I'll play off of what Karen said and tell some family stories. My dad, he passed of cancer when I was 21 years old, 96. I probably shouldn't have dated myself like that, but anyway, I kept telling my mom that he was still around, that he was still in the house and he was watching out after her, and that he wouldn't go until he knew that she was okay. And she just kept blowing me off and, oh yeah, whatever, the loony Jennifer. And one day I get this strange phone call from my mother and she's freaking out. I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" She said, the phone next to the bed where your father died is playing a tune. You know the old phones. Karen knows what I'm talking about. And you press the button and it would make a tone and you could play little songs on them. And so she's calling from the cordless phone in the kitchen. And this is a phone that's hooked up, to the wall, like in the old days. And it's she holds out the cordless phone. She goes, "Listen." And she holds it out and it's playing a song. She goes, "Do you know what song that is?" I said, "No, not right offhand." She said, "It's a song we played at your dad's funeral." She said, "It's your dad." I said, "Well, answer the phone and see what he wants." And she picked up the phone, and of course, it was a dial tone and whatever. And then he blinked the lights, and from then on out, she believed me when I told her dad was around. Yeah.
All
That's
right.
super cool. That's a cool one, Jen. I like that.
Definitely. Okay, let's see. I got a little list here. I think I'm gonna go with a guest I had on whenever I first started doing the show. Haven't had him on recently, not really a fan of his recent work, and he's an interesting guy. I'll say that. If you've ever watched Jeff Doherty, the Christian whistleblower, or any of his material, he's had some interesting stories whenever he came on my show, and this probably about 2019, maybe 2020, or yeah, probably about 2019. He came on, and he told two stories about when he was a missionary and he went, I think the first one was in South America. And these stories are more weird and crazy than scary, but it's pretty interesting if they're true, by the way. But well, I'll just give him the benefit of the doubt. The first one he was, I believe, I think it was in Africa, and they were doing healings for people, laying hands on people. They would go up and tell them, what's wrong? Please heal me of this. And he said at the time he like half-ass believed in that stuff, even though he was a preacher at the time. He didn't really have the faith. But this one gentleman walks in to be healed, and he's not just blind, he has no eyeballs, none. And Jeff looks at his, supervising pastor or whatever's above him, and he's like, "What the hell you want me to do? Seriously?" And he's like, "Yeah, just do what you can. I don't know, lay your hands on him, see what happens." So he does, and he says, he shit you not, he felt this fluttering under his hands. And when he lifted him, the dude had beautiful blue eyes that could see, and he had no eyeballs before. Had no idea what to think of any of that. But he said it changed his faith after that. Although since then, I think his faith has changed many other times. But that's a crazy story. And the other one that he told me was when he was also doing missionary work. And I think this was after that incident. They were in South America and they were trying to, of course, teach Christianity to one of these tribes. And their shaman chief was very angry at this, and he charged into one of the church services that they were giving, and he said, like in Jen's story, this dude had black eyes, and he walked up and said, something like, I'm stronger than your God. And he started floating and levitating. And Jeff looked at his partner or whatever, and they both started praying and saying, in the name of Jesus Christ, we banish you. And the dude fell flat on the floor, like the burst, he lost his wind. And he said some kind of like mist came out of the dude. But that's a pretty crazy story. Like I said, if it's true, if it's true.
That is really crazy. I couldn't imagine experiencing something like that. That would be something else.
Yeah,
I
man.
I I thought of something now. I don't know if I told it on your show before, Chris. I think I said it on Karen's show when she interviewed me. So I'll rehash it this one last time. This is actually it's not it's kind of scary, kind of crazy. And this happened when I was 8 years old. It was still to this day. I'm not sure if it was a dream. I don't know because of how realistic and how lifelike it was the whole time. So I was 8. I was in my bed, couldn't sleep, 8-year old insomnia. And I felt like I had dozed off. And then I awoke to my bedroom door opening. And then in walks these two little boys. Now, these two little boys looked identical. Like they could have been identical twins. They had this weird, like, bowl cut. That's probably the best way I can describe it. And they had brown hair, blue eyes, and they were wearing this kind of jumpsuit outfit. And they both were wearing the same one. And I remember I looked at them and I wasn't afraid. I was like just intrigued, and these two new kids just walked in my room. And I'm thinking new friends, cool. And they're like, we want you to come with us. But when they said it, it was telepathic. It didn't like leave their mouth. So I was like, okay, cool. So like I hopped out of my bed. And they start taking me down the stairs. And mind you, when I was growing up, my house was a single family home. We lived on a street right next to a cul-de-sac, just for reference for what I'm about to tell you. I open the front door. There's no street, there's no cul-de-sac, and there's this giant field with a hot air balloon in the middle of the field. And so I thought this was very strange as I'm looking around, a young eight-year-old me. So I said, okay. So we start walking out, and my house is the only house in this field at this point. The neighborhood has vanished. There's no other homes. It's just my house in this field. And they're walking me towards this hot air balloon. So I go up and I get inside of the hot air balloon, and we start going up. And I remember I'm like looking over the edge of this hot air balloon, and I'm seeing the ground just start to, gets farther and farther away. And I'm looking up and I see us like getting up into the stratosphere, like we're like breaching out of the atmosphere of Earth. And so we paused there, and I remember I'm like looking down and I'm like, holy crap, this is so cool. Like, this is so strange. And then they turned me around and they looked at me and they sat me down. That's the best way to describe it. Now, I don't know if it was force per se that they used, but it was stern. We'll put it that way. They were like, we need you to sit here. And I was like, okay. So I sat down, and they took their fingers like this and they started poking me with their fingers. And now when they started poking me, I can't really describe the sensation that I was feeling. It didn't feel good, but it didn't feel bad per se. And I remember it felt almost like a weird kind of static electricity. Like every time like they would touch me, it felt like this numbing, this electrical sensation of some kind. And I remember like every time they did it, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like it was like, what are you guys doing to me? And they didn't really respond to that. And they just kept doing what they were doing. And then after that, they ended up lowering the hot air balloon. And I remember I'm like looking at and I see the field, and it's just my house in the middle of this field. That was still one of the biggest things that like blew my mind about the whole experience, was that my whole neighborhood disappeared. All my friends' houses disappeared, and somehow my house was in the middle of this giant open field. And so we landed right in the same spot we took off from. They helped me out of this balloon, and then they walked me up into my house, and they walked me right up my stairs, and I hopped in my bed, and they didn't even say goodbye. They just turned around and then they left. And still to this day, just because of the whole nature of the experience and how lifelike it felt. So, you guys know when you're having a dream and you can kind of tell that you're dreaming. There was no differentiation of that for me in this experience. None. Like this was probably it felt like a waking experience. If anything, it felt like the most lucid of lucid dreams that I could have ever potentially had. So still to this day, this one, I'm hoping, or I will find the answer to what the hell that was before I leave this planet. I will. But that to me was just so profoundly bizarre. I mean, some people have said it was an abduction experience, that they could have potentially used some kind of cloaking tech to make me think they were little kids and for me to think that I was in a hot air balloon and experience that. All I know, it is by far to this day one of the strangest things that has ever happened to me. Enough so that I still remember it. That's how vivid it was.
It's just two midgets with an air balloon, with a hot air balloon. That's all.
They chose one hell of a time to interrupt me, goddamn it. It was nuts though.
All right, Karen, any more stories?
Yep, I got one. But I'm only going to tell part of it. It's part of a bigger story. But long story short, I moved into a rental unit, and it was a very sad time for me. I was in a very deep state of grieving. My children had gone to live with their father. He and I were divorced. He was remarried, and he prevented me from seeing them. So I was really just beside myself with heartache. And I started having suicide ideation, but it was in a very specific way that is not common, that I don't know how it entered my mind, but I kept wanting to kill myself. So obviously I didn't. And there's more to the story, which it actually goes into when I had an encounter with angels. But I'm not going to tell that part of the story. I've told it quite a few times. But the part that I do want to tell that I think is really interesting is after I sort of recovered, I actually got my kids back 6 months later, and long story short, and put my life back together again. And I made friends with a woman, and she asked me where I lived. And I told her, she says, "Oh my God, do you know what happened in that house?" And I said, "No." And she says, "Well, I'm friends with the guy who lived there, his mother. And I know for a fact that he killed himself in the house, and this is how he did it." And it was the very exact same way that I was being enticed to kill myself. So, what I think happened, and this is just a theory, is that the energy residue of him doing that, killing himself in that house, was still present in the house. And because I was at a very low vibrational state, because I was in such a deep state of grieving, I somehow tapped into that. And it wasn't even my thought, it wasn't even my desire, but somehow it ended up affecting me. So I'm happy to say I'm still here, but if I hadn't run into the woman, I never would have known that I meant become friends with this woman. I never would have found out about the original story of what happened in that house. That's it.
Oh, Jennifer.
I don't think I have any more for you tonight.
All right. Well, I will just close us out with two more quick stories here. The next one comes from my friend James Keenan. He also does research out in the Uintah Basin, but this really doesn't have anything to do with Skinwalker Ranch. This story was about his, before he started paranormal research, he was a police officer and he was making a call to a house for a domestic disturbance, or so he thought. He gets to the house and there's this couple, and they say, "Look, you're not going to believe it, but just go upstairs. And they're like, what? And they hear like yelling upstairs. They hear arguing and cursing. They're like, what is that? And they're like, we don't know. They're like, what do you mean you don't know? They're like, trust me, just go look upstairs. So they're like, what the fuck? So him and his partner are slowly walking up the stairs, and the arguing gets louder and it sounds more hostile, and there's cursing and yelling. And they get to the top of the stairs, and there's like this wood panel wall, but there's faces coming out, and they're cursing at them and yelling at them and hissing and making all kinds of noises. And these faces are just pushing their way out of the walls, and they're just sitting there, both these cops just sitting there staring at it for a couple minutes until it just goes away and disappears. And they just walk downstairs. They're like, "You gonna file this one?" Nope. So they're just like, "No, we're not. We don't know. We're not touching this." But it turns out that James found out that that couple had a lot of domestic issues. Like they would argue a lot. There was a lot of even probably violence in the house, and he believes it could have been some sort of like Karen's story, some sort of energetic manifestation from all the negative energy that they were putting out that kind of made this manifestation occur. But that's pretty crazy. And one more, it's a quick one. I think this one was from Tony Merkel, or someone else that had a Bigfoot encounter, but it's a Bigfoot story, not your everyday Bigfoot story. This guy is in the middle of the woods. I'm not sure what he's doing, but he hears a baby crying, and probably not the smartest decision. He goes following the sound of the baby crying through the woods, and he's getting closer, and the crying's getting louder. And he sees a bush, and he's like, "Oh, there's a baby behind that bush. It's crying. It's right there." And when he opens the bush, it's the most massive, gnarliest Bigfoot he's ever seen, and it's crying like a baby right in front of him, and then all of a sudden switches to the biggest, loudest howling growl that he's ever heard, and it vibrates his whole chest, and he almost passes out. It's such like this powerful growl right in his face. And he said that the Bigfoot thing just turned around and walked away after it growled in his face. But man, that was that would have made me do the pants for sure. For sure.
Yeah, I think that one definitely would have caused some slippage. We'll put it that way.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Is there any other final tales that anyone would like to tell, or are we ready to close out for the evening?
I we could talk about the world right now. That's a scary tale enough, is it
Yeah.
not?
That's terrifying. Yes,
That's
yes.
terrifying.
But I think that's one that we'll just have to let play out with some popcorn and sodas on the couch. But
I dig that.
yeah, man, it's getting pretty scarifying out there, but it's gonna be a good time. I think it's all for the best either way. But thank you all for joining us for this wonderful Halloween panel. Very scary stories. And one more time, let's go around and tell everybody where they can find you and all your wonderful content. We'll start with you, Jen, this time.
I'm Jennifer Halcome. You can find me at jenniferhalcome@gmail.com. I am a Reiki master teacher, life coach, and psychic intuitive.
Karen.
Um, My name is Karen Holton. You can find me at Karen Holton TV on most platforms. Of course, I'm proud member of the Forbidden Knowledge News Network. You can find me there, and you can also, all the links will be below in the description for everybody. And I have a YouTube channel. I have channel memberships now for those of you who want to receive my perks and help support the channel. I have several tiers starting from very, very low cost up to, well, more significant cost, depending on how deep your pockets go. And I'm also available on Odyssey, Telegram, X, Rumble, pretty much everywhere, and all audio podcasts. So please do come check me out at Karen Holton TV. And check out some of my content.
Sweet, Stephen.
All right, guys, I am Stephen Stathis of BG Cast. Of course, you can find me on the Forbidden Knowledge Network with everybody else here and some other great podcasts. And that's www.forbiddenknowledge.news. And do me a favor and check out all 3 documentaries, coming almost 4 now. It's really cool to see all of that. And guys, you can find me on every major podcast platform. You can find me on Rumble and YouTube under BGCast. You can find me on Facebook under BGCast, X under BGCast. I'm letting my Instagram die, but if you want to find me there too, that is also under BGCast. And I'm working on a couple things now as we speak. I'm not going to let on to too much, but I am looking at releasing an ebook next year. So that it's going to be called the BG Method for total mind, body, and spiritual health. So be looking forward to that, guys. And thanks for having me on tonight.
Sweet. That's awesome, man.
Thanks.
All right. You can find Forbidden Knowledge News, all podcast platforms, Rumble, Rockfin. We are back on YouTube and the regular social media, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And thank you all again for joining us for this panel, and thank you all for listening. I'm going to go to my secret Illuminati sacrifice meeting. That was a joke because a lot of you take that shit too seriously. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and until next time, everyone, good night.
Thank you for joining me for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change that you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to my YouTube and other channels at Karen Holton TV. Click the like button, leave me a comment, and share this podcast with your friends. Check out my website at www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com to see my free resources and amazing products and services. All the links will be in the description below. As part of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, you will find the Quantum Guide Show with Karen Holton and also the Aliens and Angels podcast on all audio platforms. Until next time, keep up the good work.